This is the Raw and Radical Women in the Arts podcast, and I am your host, Maureen Broadbeck.
Raw, unprocessed.
In each episode, we explore the mechanisms of identity, vulnerability, authenticity, empowerment, and social change through conversations with inspiring women who are making history and challenging the status quo in both the art world and in society.
Radical, rebel, progressive.
We talk about their real-life challenges and celebrate cis and transgender women so that you can be inspired, empowered, take action, and further your critical understanding about what it means to be a woman in the arts.
Woman, feminism. A revolutionary catalyzing reformation. Radical.
Welcome to Raw and Radical Women in the Arts podcast. Today we are welcoming Nathalie Herschdorfer. Nathalie is a curator and an art and photography historian, and she is the director of Photo Élysée in Lausanne since June 2022, a museum dedicated to photography. Before that, she was the director of the Musée des Beaux-Arts Le Locle. She has curated over 50 exhibitions bringing together artists from all over the world, including Louise Bourgeois, Stanley Kubrick, Sol Levitt, Hiroshi Sugimoto, Vic Muniz, Todd Ido, and also Henri Cartier-Bresson. She is also the artistic director of Art Plus 1000 Festival, a festival dedicated to contemporary photography. She also manages several exhibition projects at an international level. In 2021, she curated the L at Paris Photo, a program dedicated to women artists in the Paris Photo Fair. She is a speaker and she teaches at ECAL in Lausanne, the Cantonal Art School, and she is the author on several books on photography, including the Thames and Hudson Dictionary of Photography, published by Thames and Hudson in 2018, and Body, the photography book, also published by Thames and Hudson in 2019. She is engaged in the representation of women in contemporary photography and art. Please welcome Nathalie Herschdorfer. Hello, Nathalie. Welcome to the show.
Hello.
Could you first tell us a little bit about your first experiences in the world of art and photography and what inspired you to become an art historian and curator?
I remember about visits I had in museums with my grandmother when I was a kid. And this is true that it was always a joy. Maybe it was a joy also to be with my grandmother. So I was very close to her. And I guess somehow these first experiences in museums were very inspiring for me. But also I have a very close relationship to my aunt, and my aunt is a painter. And when I was a kid, I was always looking at her painting, and I was in her studio, and I was fascinated by that. Not that I wanted to be an artist myself, but I really liked this kind of atmosphere. I think these two experiences together brought me to the job I do today.
Excellent. So lots of women actually inspired you.
It was about, exactly.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And in your studies, were women represented equally? Did you notice already then an underrepresentation of women?
Well, no, not at all. And that's true that maybe after my studies, I wasn't so aware of that during my studies, but after that, I realized that, to become an art historian in Switzerland, we had to read a lot of books. And one of these books, two of these books were these most well-known history of art, over the, I don't know how many centuries, and one of them was the Gombrich, and the other one was the Jensen. And both of these books I had to read and digest. And I think not a single female name is mentioned in these books. So I didn't realize that at that time. But of course, I think it had an impact unconsciously about, why we don't talk about women in the arts.
Yeah. And that's very interesting because I guess when you just learn, you don't realize we're just telling you this is the way it was. So you don't especially ask those questions right away.
Yeah, exactly. And also I realized today, after now 2 decades of, working in this art world, that the way we were introduced to the art history was about, these major names, all men and genius. It's all about, this myth of the genius. So it was always about, individuals, just men who were so great and exceptional, lives. And this is true that today I'm really interested in this, other way of looking at art and not through just names. And I think there's still an effort to do to just look at art not just as a contemplation of these artworks that are amazing and should be, we should be silent and respectful and look at that as, the hand of a genius. And for me, in a way, that's how I learned about history of art. And I think we should deconstruct that way of looking at paintings and sculptures.
Yeah, it's interesting because more and more right now, this whole idea of being born a genius and being born talented without no effort is being more and more deconstructed by women, especially. And interesting times, I have to say. But it is true, when I was 25 years old, I didn't question that. I have to say that at that time I just, learned all that history of art and didn't really think about another way of, thinking about art. And is there a specific event or what made you aware really of this gap?
Well, I think it came more and more. I was more and more conscious over the years about that. First of all, when I discussed directly with, artists, female artists, and then realizing also that it was quite difficult for them to make a living in art. It's true as well for male artists, but more and more discussing with female artists, I realized how this world was difficult and made for men. That was one of the things. So it's because of my meetings over the years with women. Yeah. And then the other way also, then I realized that I was constantly approached as a curator and also as a museums director by men, mostly by men. And I had to ask to female artists to send me works. So that was also something that really made me conscious about the gap. And the other thing is also because I teach in an art school here in Switzerland at ECAL, and most of my students are female students. Yeah. So also seeing that with, this new generation, that it's mostly women, but in my world when I work, and think about making an exhibition or a book, when I visit exhibitions or museums or galleries, it's mostly men. Yeah. So then I realized that I was wondering also what happens to all these women after school.
Yeah. Yeah. And so what happens?
Exactly. So that's true that I remember maybe it was 10 years ago. So quite recent, I met a woman, a photographer, that I think she was about 50 years old. And I was a bit surprised because it was in one of these festivals where you meet in portfolio reviews, young people. Mostly, people, emerging artists or people who they finished schools and they try to get a few advices and they are eager to, start working in this photography world. And she was a bit older. And she said, before showing you my most recent work, I want just to explain what I did before. And I was a bit surprised because usually you just bring your portfolio and it's recent works. And she showed me works she made in the 1990s when she was at school, in a very good art school. And then the very first, series she made just after school. And she was brilliant. And then there was a gap. And then she showed me the recent work. And then I asked what happened between the 90s and today. And then she explained, well, I had children, I had a family to raise, and of course it was difficult, and I couldn't find the time and have the money to do that work, artistic work. And here I am today, 50 years old, and I have to start again.
Yeah.
And I have to say that it was a shock for me to realize that. And of course, I understand, having a family and little children, you cannot jump in a plane or in a train and attend all these exhibitions or go to the dinners and meet people in galleries and openings. Of course, it's not possible. And then you have to find the time also to work and, this silence you may need at home or in your studio and have the money to have a studio and then the time to sell your works and all that. And then it made me realize how difficult it is also for women. And this is not because it's just women, it's because a society, this is the way we share responsibilities in families. And of course, even in this art world where we think that people are more open and there's a balance, and in a way what happens to women in society also happens to female artists, that when they have children and they raise a family, it's on their shoulders and it's difficult.
Mm-hmm. And you, in your field, did you feel that difference? Did you feel more challenges for your career?
Well, I remember when I was, starting to build my career, I was mostly talking to curators and all where they were, male curators. That I remember, but they were also older. It was another generation.
Yeah.
So I have a few anecdotes where I could see that people looked at me as, this young girl and she's cute, so she's okay, but it's just, nice to have her on the table.
Yeah.
I could feel that.
Great.
But then there were a few women that I remember in the field, in the photography field. And I remember Martha Gilly at Jeux de Paume when she started at Jeux de Paume. Martha Gilly came there in the mid-2000, I think. And I was quite impressed. And I could see that she was a tough woman. And I could see that she had to be very strong to make somehow the world ignore that she was a woman and she was a director, a museum director. And it was striking for me. But I have to say that today I talk most of the time to women. I realize that it happens everywhere, not just in Switzerland, where I think all the photography institutions now are directed by women. But I see that also on an international level. And I'm very happy to have all these, a relationship with women, because somehow I think that it makes our relationship also easier. It's kind of sweeter, I would say, between women. And today I have the feeling that it's more balanced.
Yeah, excellent. This is good news.
This is good news, I guess, yeah. But of course, we have to make sure that we continue on that way. My point is that we need this balance. It's not like I'm saying that we just need to have only women. I remember talking to curators from the Nordic countries, Finland, specifically Finland, when I discussed with them maybe 5-10 years ago. They said that in Finland they were mostly women, like museums director. And then I realized that it wasn't the case at all in France, if you think specifically about France. So, of course, I think there's still work to do. We still need to be, careful about that. But, thinking about today, even in France, the director of Le Louvre is a woman today. So I think there's a shift now.
Yeah, and it's going towards the right direction.
Absolutely.
And congratulations, by the way, because you just started a new position as the museum director of Photo Élysée.
Thank you.
So let's talk about the body and the skin. In May 2019, you published a book entitled Body. And I was wondering if you could talk about the importance of affirmation and affirmative action through the body, the skin, the naked body. And in your book, you mentioned a term that I really like, feminist prism. And can you explain this term and where it comes from?
Yeah, it's true that for me it was an interesting research.
Yeah.
First of all, if you go back to history of photography, you have this great tradition, and this is the nude tradition. And of course, being a historian of photography, I would say that photography is, born from industry and from art, like, history of paintings. It's a mix of both of these traditions. And photography took this tradition of the nude, representing the body and, naked body. But naked body it's a bit different. The nude is a tradition, and this is a very long tradition we have in paintings as well, in sculptures. And photography in the 19th century just continued this tradition. And if you look at history of photography, the 20th century is again the same tradition. Of course, it's more photographic and the way more modernist and the way that the body was represented, but still it is this kind of glorification of, female body. First of all, young bodies, beautiful skin and beautiful shapes and kind of timeless beauty. And that's exactly the tradition you can see in history of paintings. But when I started to do my research about body and contemporary photography, I could see that more and more artists deconstruct this idea of the nude. Of course, there are still photographers today doing that, but I guess I'm more, I don't look at these works so much. But more and more, I could see this way of deconstructing this tradition. And this is true that it also comes from the female gaze. In a way, for like almost 180 years, that's when photography was born. Behind the camera, they were mostly men. Women were there, of course, but they kind of continued this tradition of representing, the female body in the way that it's a beautiful object. And it's an object to look at, look at with the male gaze. And I have the feeling that even myself as a woman, I was educated with this male gaze, looking at, a woman and looking at female bodies through this gaze. And what happened in the recent years is that more and more female photographers, they want to change and switch this way of looking at female body. And I can give you an example. Vivian Sasson, she's, for me, a very interesting photographer. She works both in fashion photography, and she has artistic practice, personal practice. And she has a lot of images with female bodies. And of course, if you think about fashion photography, it's about this, glorification of the female body. Yeah. And the way she approached it is very interesting because in a very subtle way, she just shifts this gaze. And she changes the way we look at these, even naked bodies, female bodies. And for me, it was an interesting body of work to just study and to realize that without shocking and without bringing very difficult images that show the body, more like difficult to see, or that's another strategy. But continuing this tradition of glorification of the body, because she glorifies the female body, you can change the gaze. And she's one of many artists that is doing that today.
In this book, you also talk about the common confusion between our physical body and our body image. And I was wondering if you can talk about these two concepts.
Yeah, also something I discovered with photography, because we are so exposed to photography.
Yeah,
If
true.
if you think to your experience through images, we constantly look at images. For a long time, these images were just reproduced on paper, like it was either in magazines, or it was even advertising in the street. So we see a lot of bodies through images. And looking at our own body in front of the mirror when we wake up in the morning, or when because we have mirrors in our houses, and that's also something interesting, because if you think about that 2 centuries ago, I don't think that people had this experience of looking at their body or faces through a mirror. So it's quite recent in the history of man. But we look at our body, we have this experience of having pictures of our body, and more now with the digital tools, because our smartphones, and we can photograph ourselves, and selfies, of course, we play with our self-portrait. But still, the most images we see, the experience we have to look at a photograph of the body, are images made of beautiful bodies, young bodies, these bodies that we see in fashion imagery. And there's a kind of shock when we have in front of us, our own image. And this is why people hate to go to the passport, the booth, because we always think that it's terrible and it's not us. We hate when people photograph us, and when we look at the result, we say, oh, no, it's not me, or it's not photogenic enough, or it's not what I am. So there's always a kind of, distance, and this kind of deception. So for me, it's very interesting, because it means that we have an image of ourselves in our mind that is, I guess, related to all the beautiful photographs we saw, and somehow we relate to these photographs, and we think that we can be as beautiful as these top models. Somehow it has an impact on the way we think about beauty and body.
Yeah.
And looking at real bodies, suddenly there's a kind of gap. And for me, today, there's something very interesting with social media, because we are more and more exposed to other kind of images, normal bodies, banality. And for me, that's very interesting, because for a very long time, these images didn't exist, or we were not exposed to these images. But today, when I take my phone and I look at, Instagram, I see many of these bodies, like, normal bodies. And somehow I think it's sane, because, it opens our eyes and mind. And I hope it helps also younger generation to accept, their own bodies. Even though we know how surgery has an impact today, and a lot of people go to surgery because of images, because of photography. So photography influence, the real body in that sense, because we see beautiful images, we go to, a surgery, and we show the photograph, as what we want. And it shows how much photography has an impact on our real body. But still, my hope is that, and at least for younger generation, that being more exposed to a variety, different bodies, and to understand that the body is not this beautiful image completely retouched, I think that it will help also to express other identities and to live our own body in a more sane way.
It's very interesting what you're saying, because there's something very liberating about it versus something more controlling. I mean, if we feel so uncomfortable with our bodies compared to what we're shown or how we are told it should be, there's something very controlling about it.
Yeah.
It really stops us to thrive, maybe, or to do what we want to do really, or to just be who we want to be. And it's true that all these social media, they have something that is very liberating in that sense.
Yeah, you're right. But I think it's a result of quite a long history. And if I keep this idea of, fashion imagery, even if you are not interested in fashion, even if you don't buy any of these magazines, this is part of your culture. And we are exposed to, the advertisement is big and it has an impact. All these images we see. So somehow the way it is built, it is, part of the consumption world, and we push you to consume, we push you to buy clothes, we push you to buy beauty products, and all this world is global, everywhere. I don't know where in the world we don't have, L'Oreal and, these kind of brands, and somehow we sell these beauty products, or we sell these beauty images through photography.
Yeah.
So photography has a huge impact on your life in that sense.
Yeah.
And for me, it is not something that is secondary. And that's why I'm very much interested in, the photographic works of younger generation. We discussed about, the female gaze, but I'm also interested in, to have male photographers. They should also photograph male bodies of female bodies, but in a different way. And we need to be more open and to bring, different ways of looking at the human body. And my hope is that with, what is happening today, and I agree with you, it's liberating. We see that on different, aspects in society, we discuss more about, female versus men. Racism, the race is, of course, part of also of the discussion today. And my hope is that we will be more exposed to all these, different bodies that are part of our world. And it will change the way we see how we should look at and what we should consider as being beautiful.
When you say that, I just picture in my head, a society where everybody accepts their own body and loves their own body the way it is. That would change things a lot, probably. It's really amazing. And it's very exciting and inspiring, actually, that photography has this power. And that through photography and with photography, we can reclaim our bodies, our natural bodies.
I agree with you. And that's why we need work that bring new ideas, new vision. And that's exactly what, we need to have today from all, artists living today.
Very interesting. Yeah, excellent. I just want to mention one more thing, because in the preface of your book, you write, beginning at a very young age, this tyranny of the appearance is reinforced by images that obey the hegemonic norms and ideals of the society in which we live, by those perfectly photographed bodies reproduced in magazines and online that makes us insecure about our own. And this idea of insecurity is very linked to me to the idea of the female, of the woman. And it transcribes in a way to the way women behave also, to make their work shown, to show their work, to behave. And it relates to their career. What do you think about all this?
Oh, completely. I completely agree. And in a way, it comes from, the role of women in society. You can continue to think about the body and the way we think about the female body, because, they are part of the body that we should not show, and they are completely hidden. And they are part of the body that we give a lot of visibility. And we just discussed about, what kind of bodies, and these are the bodies, but also it gives a lot of insecurity to women that they don't respond to this image. And in a way, we live in a world that were built by men, where we gave roles to women, and also the way that women live their own body, And there are many discussions today about, how we should live our body, and our body belongs to ourselves and not to the man. I mean, there are so many, issues still not resolved today, and we know how, serious they are. And all that together explain why women are still very much insecure, because now it's about the fight to be able to, live our life and be respected like we respect, men, and to be able to have a different life of the man, not to be like men, but, because our body and what we live in our body during our life, it's also something that is different. And I'm very much think that there's always this discussion also in the art world about, we shouldn't discuss that as gender. And it is either a very good artist or a bad artist. So gender has nothing to do there. And I don't agree with that, because I think that the experience you have as a woman in society, in your life, in your couple, in your family, in your work, has an influence of what you create. And the vision you want to give is related to your own experience. And your experience is an experience of a woman. It's not an experience of a man. And everything in your life and in your body is an experience of a woman. So in that sense, you cannot ignore and put aside what your body says about you as a woman. Because the minute you are outside in the street, people look at you as a woman, not as a man. And your experience, even in a society where you think that it's equal, and we may think sometimes here in the Western world that we are more or less okay, but we see it's not more or less okay. There are still fights, and we see how insecure women are still in the street. So in that sense, I think that this insecurity is really related to the body itself.
And how we look, and and that's valid for all the genders. And however we feel about our body, for sure. How we relate to our own body. Yeah. Very interesting. Thank you so much. This podcast is supported by Pro Helvetia, the Swiss Arts Council, the Republic and Canton of Geneva, and the city of Nancy in Switzerland. We are so thankful for their support and commitment to women, culture, and the arts. Thanks for listening to Raw and Radical Women in the Arts podcast. Learn more about our featured artists and sign up for news and updates by visiting our website rawradical.com.
Organic, radical, profound.
Please consider leaving us a comment and review on your preferred podcast listening platform to help others discover the show and take part in this global dialogue.
She, intuitive.
I am Maureen Broadbeck, and until next time, keep the dream alive.
Woman.